So what is going on with Tim, my Ackie monitor? It has been quite a while since I've shown Timbit on this channel. You know, he hasn't really been in any videos or vlogs recently, and because of that, a lot of people have been asking me what's happened to him or for some updates or anything, and truth is, nothing has happened to Tim. He is doing absolutely amazing. He has been growing. He is doing perfectly fine. I just haven't shown him on my channel for a while, so here we go. This video today is all about Timbit. So a quick little rundown for those of you who aren't familiar. Timbit is my yellow Ackie monitor who I got last year. I received Timbit in June of 2019, so I've had him for about a year and a half now, and in that time he has been amazing to own and he has been doing really, really well in my care. However, I don't want to say that things are going perfectly because recently I had a little bit of an issue come up and we're gonna go and talk about that. However, before we go and talk about what has been going on, let's just go ahead and feed Tim. I can see him over in the corner there and I think he's ready for some food. Alright, so in this cup here we have 5 superworms that have been dusted with calcium without D3 that we're going to be feeding to Tim. Tim is not a picky eater at all. He will eat all sorts of insects. Superworms just happen to be what is on the menu for today. So you can see Tim right on one of his basking branches right there. He probably knows that food is coming. Monitors are really smart lizards and you know, he's just pretty good about realizing this. So I'm going to be tongue feeding him. I have the superworms on a tongue here. So that one, you know, that was a little easy grab for him. That was really easy for him to just reach up and take it. So now that Tim ate his first worm, he is definitely looking for another, but I'm gonna make him work for this one a little more. I'm gonna kind of make him have to chase it around the enclosure. You know, naturally when animals eat, they have to work for their food in the wild. They have to run around after them, chasing them. Tim also just went back there, so I apologize that we can't see him, but making your animals work for their food, you know, isn't a bad thing. A lot of people might think, you know, if they're in captivity, why would we make them work for their food when we could just hand it to them? But, you know, that's not really good for their brains. It's not great for their body. You know, making them work for their food not only stimulates their brain, but it also gives them physical exercise. So now, what was this issue I was talking about? So it is not an issue to do with Tim himself. Tim is doing perfectly fine. He is entirely healthy, no issues with him there. However, the issue was with his enclosure. So this enclosure that we see right here is the enclosure that Tim is currently living in. You know, I just went and fed him in here, so I'm sure that you guys got a decent idea of what it looks like. So now, while I do enjoy this enclosure, and while I do think it is set up quite nicely, it is not the enclosure that he is supposed to be in or that I want him to be in. A lot of you may remember that this enclosure that I have right here, it's a 4x2x2 enclosure, was supposed to be for my Ackie monitor Tim. So much so that I even had this enclosure months before I got my Ackie monitor. So this enclosure was built almost 2 years ago now, and like I said, I've only had Tim for a year and a half. This enclosure was waiting and ready to go for him since before he even hatched. So when it comes to Ackie monitor care, a 4x2x2 enclosure is considered to be the minimum size to house one in. So you might be wondering, if I have that 4x2x2 enclosure already waiting for Tim, you know, like I said, I've had it for basically 2 years now before he was even born, why isn't he in that enclosure? And that's what I'm going to talk about, because I wish that he was in this enclosure. I wish that he had more room. I wish that he was in a bigger enclosure than he is right now. I do want to say that Tim is not full grown right now. He does still have growing to do. So I do think that the Exoterra still works fine for him for now. However, sometime within the next few months, I would say definitely within the next 6 months or so, he is going to need an upgrade. However, I am not going to be using the 4x2x2 enclosure that I built for him. So Tim hasn't always been living in this Exoterra here. It's only very recently that he was moved into this Exoterra. Before he was living in that Exoterra, he was living in this 40-gallon tank that you see on the ground here. Obviously, I haven't cleaned it out or anything yet. This is where he used to live. So when I very first got Tim last June, he was very, very, very tiny. He was only 9 grams when I got him. So because of his very small size at the time, I kept him in a 20-gallon long enclosure for the first little bit of his life. Then eventually he outgrew that 20-gallon long, and I moved him into that 40-gallon breeder. He lived in that 40-gallon for a while, and then recently I decided it was time to upgrade him again into the 4x2x2. So I started getting that ready for him to live in. So this is where my issues started to arise. While I was in the process of getting his 4x2x2 enclosure ready for him, the less certain I became about using it. You know, the more I was trying to set it up, I just started to not really feel safe using it anymore. I'm just gonna come out and say it. These enclosures were built 2 years ago. They work amazing for my bearded dragon and my skink. However, I don't think it is well designed for an Ackie monitor. I don't think it's the safest option. So therefore, I am not going to be using this enclosure for my Ackie monitor. So one of the reasons why I don't want to use this for my Ackie monitor is basically just because of this gap here. So the doors on the enclosure do have a little bit of a gap right here. And while this doesn't really matter when it comes to my beardy or my skink, I am a bit more worried that my Ackie might accidentally put his arm or tail through one of these holes and maybe get it stuck or injured. So that is one of the first reasons. Another reason why is because these enclosures have this hole on either side of them. So this is basically just for cords and stuff to run out of. However, this is a hole that my Ackie could escape out of. And now I definitely could go and cover it up somehow, but there is one on both sides and I would need to run cords out of it, so I'd have to figure out a bit of a system for that. So that's another reason, you know. It's definitely not something that I couldn't do, but with all the other issues I'm having with this enclosure, it's not really worth it. This here is probably one of the biggest issues I've noticed. So if you look along the bottom of the enclosure here, you know, it is solidly attached here, but after I added the substrate into the enclosure, the weight of the substrate started separating the bottom piece from the top piece. So now there's this little gap right here. So the fact that the bottom of this enclosure can't really support the weight of the substrate makes me nervous, and you know, so that is another reason why I don't want to use it. And the last reason why I didn't really want to use this enclosure anymore is because I was having a lot of trouble getting the heat to work in this enclosure. So when I was trying to set up the heating in that enclosure, I was just, I don't know, I wasn't feeling good about it. So for that enclosure, I have a halogen bulb, I have a DP projector, and I have a UVB strip. So that was all what was supposed to be inside of that enclosure. However, I honestly just didn't feel safe with it. It's, you know, the top of the enclosure there is a 2x4. And when I was mounting everything up there, it just, I don't know, I didn't feel like I could get safe distances between light bulbs. I didn't feel like I was able to achieve a safe distance from the basking spot appropriately. I was worried that my monitor would be able to get too close to the lights. There were all sorts of issues going on here. I don't want to like explain my entire thought process because that would be really lame and boring, but just know I was having a hard time setting this enclosure up and feeling good about it. Everything I did was making me kind of nervous, you know, and that is not something you want when it comes to your animal and their enclosure that they're going to live in for the rest of their life. You do not want to feel nervous or hesitant about it. So after that, I just decided, you know what, this enclosure isn't going to work for him. That's okay. I'm going to figure something else out. So part of me almost felt really bad about this because in a way it made me feel like I was unprepared for my monitor. I felt really bad about it because I do wish that he was in a bigger enclosure. And yeah, so for a little while I was kind of feeling really guilty about it. I just felt like I don't know, again, it gave me the feeling that I wasn't prepared for him, even though that is not at all the case. Like I said, I was very prepared for him. I wanted an Ackie monitor for a really long time. I had this enclosure ready for him before I even got him, but now that I have him and have experience with Ackies, I've just decided that that enclosure that I built is not a good design for him and I could do something better. So that is basically what has been going on with me and Tim and his enclosure over this past few months. I have been going back and forth in my head on what to do with him, and so ultimately I decided I was going to set him up in that Exoterra. So Tim just ran into one of his burrows. You can actually kind of see his tail sticking out right there, but he does have a big burrow like under this log here, so that is currently where he is. But I figured that I would just go and give you guys kind of a little tour of his enclosure right now. So as I mentioned, this is an Exoterra here. It measures 36 inches long, 18 inches tall, and 18 inches deep. So this long light right here is his UVB bulb, and then right there we have his heat lamp. So right here, this side of his enclosure is the warm side, and over here is the cooler side. If you look along the bottom here, you can also kind of see how I have the substrate done. So it is deeper on this side and more shallow on this side. The main reason for that is because of the bricks on this side. So these bricks are sitting directly on the bottom of the enclosure. You never want to put things like heavy bricks or rocks the dirt, because then if they dig under them and shift them around, you know, they could possibly get injured. So you want to make sure these are right on the ground so that your animal cannot get injured digging under them. But I still wanted to have the bricks exposed over here, which is why the substrate is a lot shallower over here. So this right here is his basking spot. So Ackie monitors do need very, very warm basking spots. And with the way that this is set up, it gives him multiple different temperatures that he can bask at. So this branch right here, the one that is closest to his heat lamp, is obviously the warmest spot in the enclosure. If he is basking up here, it is typically around 140 degrees. But then as he moves around to these different spots, the temperature changes. So this branch here is quite a bit cooler than this branch, and same with these bricks here. So these bricks retain quite a bit of heat. However, since they are farther away from the heat lamp, these bricks typically only stay about 110 degrees. So depending on where he is in the enclosure, he can really enjoy multiple different temperatures. So because this enclosure, you know, isn't as large as I would like it to be, I really wanted to use it to its fullest potential, which is why I have this little brick structure over here. You know, this gives him not only something to bask on, but just something to climb on and explore around. You know, he could go underneath of that brick structure there if he wanted to and hide and dig. There is another brick in the back there that you can see, so there's a whole little structure there for him to kind of climb around and explore. And then obviously there is lots of wood in the enclosure that he loves climbing on. You know, Ackie monitors aren't tree monitors or anything, but they love to climb when they can, so giving them things to climb on is really, really great. And it's just really good to, you know, utilize the space. Having branches and things like this, it just uses the space properly. So for his substrate, he does have a sand soil mix that is more heavily sand than it is soil. Now, a lot of people, when they hear sand and reptiles, immediately panic, thinking that it's going to cause impaction. Know that it is most likely not going to. A sand soil mix like this works works really well for Ackies. So one thing that can be difficult about Ackies is they like really high temperatures, but they also like a decent amount of humidity, and I found that this substrate works really good at holding humidity, especially when it comes to his burrows and stuff. You know, it holds burrows really well. If I stick my finger in, it's gonna leave a hole the shape of my finger, so this shows that it holds his burrows really well. And the substrate just also holds a decent amount of moisture in it, which is great. I never have to like overly mist this enclosure in order to keep the humidity up. It works really well, and as long as your care is correct, impaction isn't as much of an issue as many people think it is. So on top of all of the wood and the bricks and stuff that's in this enclosure, I do also have some fake plants. There's no live plants in here. This is all just plastic plants. They work well for him. You know, he's not gonna dig them up, and you know, this isn't his permanent enclosure anyways. So these plants work really well in here. This is one of my favorites. I don't know, I really like this one. I think it's cute. He has this fake skull decor, and then over here he has his water and food dish. So it's a bit dirty, you know, there's a little bit of dirt and stuff in here from him, but this is the dish. It has this super cute like painting of an Ackie on it. So this was made by my friend Daniela Clausen. I'll link her Etsy shop down below if you are interested in looking at her dishes, because they're super cute. And I got this for Christmas last year from my friend Tyler, so that was just like a super great gift. And so I normally just have this in his enclosure back here. I don't feed him out of a dish a ton because I do like to like tongue feed him and make him work for his food like I was talking about, but the dish is great for, you know, if I just quickly need to leave something in there, or if it's for the pet sitter or whatever. So that is his adorable little food dish right there. So as I mentioned before, he was living in that 40-gallon enclosure, and while the Exoterra isn't really a whole lot bigger than that, it is slightly taller, but the floor space is the same. It just works so much better because the tank that he was in before is a top opening enclosure, whereas this Exoterra is front opening, which I way prefer, but it is also better for the animal. Animals don't really like being grabbed from the top. It can freak them out. It is a lot easier to work with them when you have a front opening enclosure. So a couple weeks ago, I decided to set up this Exoterra for him, and he is now going to live there until I build his new enclosure. I've mentioned how in 2021, I'm going to be building a whole bunch of new snake enclosures, and with that, I'm also going to be building a new Ackie monitor enclosure, and I'm going to be building it differently and bigger than my previous one. So as I said before, a 4x2x2 is considered to be the bare minimum for an Ackie. It can work, however, many keepers will tell you that the bigger you can go, the better. So I decided for this new enclosure that I've built, I've already kind of planned it out, but I'm going to be building a 6-foot long enclosure that is also 3 foot tall. This is going to give me a lot more room to give him a lot of substrate to burrow in. Ackies do like to burrow, so this way he can have like 12 inches of substrate while still also having a lot of room in his enclosure to explore. And another reason why I really wanted to go with an enclosure this size is because I feel like it's going to be a lot safer and easier for me to heat it correctly. Okay, so there you guys go. There is kind of the rundown on what has been going on with Tim and his enclosure and all of that sort of stuff over the past few months, and also, you know, a look into my future plans for Tim. You know, just a little rundown. Tim is doing great. He's doing fantastic. He has grown so much since I got him. No issues with him at all. There was a slight issue with his enclosure, but you know, rather than just being sad that that enclosure isn't working, I am instead trying to just be very happy that now I get to build him a really nice big enclosure. That is going to be really cool. So make sure if you want to see more of Tim and his future enclosure, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you here, and you know, that'll make sure that you guys know what's going on with Tim a few months from now. So all of that said, I am just going to go ahead and end the video here. Thank you all so much for watching. I do really appreciate it, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and also be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. It really does mean a lot to me if you do that. It helps me out a ton, so I really do appreciate it. Also, don't forget to check out all of my social media. That will all just be down in the description below. I would love to have you guys over there as well. With all of that said, I'm just gonna end the video now, so thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.